Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner. I've been thinking about it lately. Brad, what does the partner ecosystem is going to look like in the very near future? I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on February 25th, 2026. Kris. What will the ecosystem look like in the future? I don't know. I really don't know. I've had many conversations, heard a lot of opinions, a lot of different insights. And one thing a lot of people talk about is the billable hour dead? Should we have a subscription model? The value of the billable hour? With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with two individuals to discuss just that. We had the opportunity to speak with Christine Nicola and Alfredo. Good morning, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, or good morning, should I say. Good morning.
Yes. It depends on where you are. We're running all over the world. It's interesting with time zones. I really wish we just had one time zone, to be honest with you. I think that it would be so neat to have just one time. Like if it's 0600, it's 0600. If you're in England, 0600 may be your bedtime. And if you're on the West Coast of the United States, it may be your waking time, right? It just doesn't matter. But it makes it easier for us to communicate if we say we want to have a meeting at a specific hour.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
everybody should change. Everybody should change for us, to make it easy for you, Brad.
Yeah.
There was a time when one nation dictated a time zone for everybody. And so that was before 1776. And so some people objected that wasn't really the right thing to do. And then here we are.
That's right.
Well, I object to having multiple time zones, and I wish we just had one time. So if I said we're meeting at a specific time, everybody knows what that time is. And you just your schedule where you're located would dictate, sundown you go to bed, sunrise you wake up, you get hungry you eat. Right? It doesn't have to be.
That's how it used to be.
Yeah.
Well, in the days of technology and how fast we can do things and the advances of technology, I almost want to go back to doing that. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're actually here to talk about something different. But before we jump into that conversation, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, Alfredo?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to tell you more about myself. So my name is Alfredo, as you can clearly see here, and I am the founder and principal trainer at D365 Training, which is a Microsoft training services partner that I started a couple of years ago after spending a few years in consulting. And so I take care of the training programs for consultants and users. We primarily work on essentially two channels. One is the training for certifications, and the other is bespoke training and advisory. And I've been working in Dynamics for about 12, 13 years. But before that, I used to be a supply chain consultant. And before that, logistics. And I started my career as a delivery driver. And that's how essentially I paid for my studies. And I used to have a problem with that. In my first few years in consulting, right, putting on a suit and starting, talking, getting into a, meeting room with CFOs and directors and other consultants higher, they're more senior than me. And I used to say, oh, no, I should never really, let people know that I used to be a delivery driver and then a warehouse worker. But then eventually, as I started working in operation and supply chain management, I realized that actually that gave me a unique insight. And so a few years ago, I decided to play that card when I was having a meeting with a warehouse manager and said, you guys wearing these fancy suits, talking about technology, you got no idea what we do here day in and day out. I said, hold on, what about me, mate? And I put on my Class C driving license. Can you see that? It was like 12 years ago, before you even started, working in this warehouse. I used to drive one of those So I know exactly what you're talking about. That, as you can imagine, has changed the tone of the conversation. And since then, I said, you know what? I'm going to keep my driving license. I don't drive lorries anymore, but I still have my driving license.
Not for fun?
And so, yeah.
I drive as little as possible, period. So I can relate to that. But that's an interesting story. And it is, I think it is good when you have those conversations where you can relate to someone. It gives you some common ground and a sense of understanding, so that it's easier to communicate if somebody, I have found, and in my opinion, that it's easy to communicate with someone if you have a similarity or a similar background, because you can get that, you understand, and they don't feel like you don't understand, I guess you could say. You have that commonality. Interesting story. Suits. Speaking of suits, I haven't worn a suit. I think I wear a suit rarely at this point. When I first started consulting, I used to wear suits all the time. But now times have changed, over here at least.
Even ties. You got to wear ties.
Yes,
you know?
I used to wear a tie every day. Now I only do it at special occasions, where it's customary. It's interesting how dress has changed. I know some areas of business still wear suits and ties, but it's no longer predominant. Mr. Christie, sir, you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, this is probably, in the last year, this is probably the third or fourth time I'm wearing a shirt. That's just for you, I don't usually wear those things, but I figured, hey, why not? So anyway, my name is Chris Nicola, and I've been doing Business Central since 1999. Well, when it was called Vision. I guess as of right now, basically the way we hear is me keep talking about the subscription concept, fixed price, though mainly subscription on both in Power BI and Business Central, right? I don't think I have a good story. I'm the opposite of Alfredo from that perspective. I feel since I'm originally from Romania, right? I worked in UK for 2 years, and then I worked in US here. Then I've always been, it's always been a little bit of a difference, right? Because it's kind of, I don't really belong in Europe anymore, but I'm also not 100% American, right? So it's always been for me, between that and being a computer programmer at origin, right? It's always been, my mindset is just sort of straight to the point and, just sort of break things down and whatever. But obviously a lot of times the ability to relate obviously helps. So that's always been an interesting tension, right? And actually lately it's funny because, I guess I am probably closer to American right now, given I've been here for a long time, but I've had some interactions with companies up in Europe, and it's, I cannot believe the differences, right? Because I guess I've changed that much. They're a lot more, I don't know if it's rigid or structured, depending how you want to look at it, right? But it's kind of a weird thing to find myself somewhere in the middle, right? Because I'm also not 100% American. So, but yeah, that's always been an interesting sort of, part of how do you convey your message,
It is interesting. Geographical differences are everywhere. And it's even within the United States. If you're in one portion of the country, sometimes you can say or do something that someone may think is improper, where in another region it is. But you mentioned that you're sort of in the middle. It makes me think of the question, when someone asks a person where they're from, what is the answer, right? And where I'm going with this is, you could be born in one place, but then live in another place for 20 years. And where do you say you're from, right? Is it from the place that you live for 20 years, or is it from where you're born, or is it from where you feel is home? Like I know myself, I grew up in the Northeast, and I spent most of my life in one state. And then before I moved down here, I transitioned to another state, but I call that state home, even though I spent most of my life in a different place.
You let the whole timeline. You talk about the whole timeline, because like in the U.S., right, you have states, and sometimes someone asks where you're from, you have to say what state you're from, and then you eventually like, I move here, and then end up here. Yeah. This is my home now, but you sort of have to tell that, because I think everybody has come from somewhere.
But everyone does. But what do you call home, right? Do you call home? Is it where you lived most of your life, or is it where you feel?
It's when you have your driver's license at the state, and then you you say that's where my home is. Look, it's
Brad,
on my driver's license.
I don't know what you're saying. But here's the one answer that you can never say that it's your home, okay? Florida, you could never be with a straight face say that is your home, okay?
That is true.
I will
I would be embarrassed to say.
I never heard about that.
I will never I won't dispute you on that one. We may disagree on some things over the years that we've known each other, but that one I violently agree with you on that one.
What they're saying is that Florida, there's nobody native there, is what they're saying. Yeah, everyone got imported into Florida.
Yeah, most people are transplants. Yeah.
I have tried to. I mean, I normally, and my answer is, I mean, when I came to US, it was, New York, and then I did travel actually around the country, Houston, Montana, and then back into upstate New York, and now back in New York City. So I do say New York, right? When people ask me where I'm from, but then they usually always go, "Oh yeah, that's an amazing New York accent," So it's like, and then I have to clarify. I mean, I'm pissed off because I was 2 years in UK, and I wish I actually got the British accent, but what are you gonna do? But I mean, yeah, normally New York for me feels a lot more home than anything else, So
yeah, that's where I was wondering, says home. Yeah, Alfredo has the great accent. It's soothing. I listen to his videos that he shares and the snippets and stuff, and it's soothing. It's educational as well as soothing. It's good for learning. But to get into the conversation, Kris, you spoke with us a few episodes ago. I'm not certain exact the time, but and it's a conversation that I've seen a lot of and heard a lot of and participated in with where we are in the world, and it's time and material, the billable hour versus the subscription type model or the paying for the service type model. So if you could you just bring us back to your take on implementations and the model for billing?
Okay, so I mean, basically the model for us would be subscription model is probably the main one. And essentially the idea is, I mean, I guess, I figured originally, though, that probably shouldn't, it's not the only thing about it. It's sort of unlimited development. I mean, essentially unlimited development both for Business Central and for Power BI, right? Obviously, ultimately, not anything can be unlimited totally. So the rule that we have is basically one project at a time. So you can put as many you want in the queue, but we only work on one at a time, I mean, other people that are offering subscription model, not necessarily, I mean, I don't know anybody else offering right now in BC, but I've modeled myself or I've asked questions when I thought about this from CRM, from Power Platform. Each of them has a little bit of a different way of just kind of how they sort of put a limitation to it, right? Now, for us, it's kind of a model of you are hiring and, if you had a team for yourself, it would kind of be working one thing, and if something becomes a priority, then essentially you sort of you switch them to that, and you put the other thing on pause, and then you go back to it, and things like that. And then let's say if there's multiple projects, theoretically you can add multiple. Well, one subscription, we think of it as a pipeline. So I mean, you can add multiple pipelines if you truly had that much development, right? I mean, I don't know that unless you're a partner, which is obviously the subscription model could work for a partner as well as for a customer. If you're a partner, you probably could need more than one. And then also, I mean, I try to, but it's a mouthful to try to put this in marketing, but it's not about, hey, you get a fractional developer, right? I mean, if you want to use the word fraction, you get a fraction of a team, right? Essentially you get, PM, consultant, system architect, developer, everything that we have in our company, right? Essentially would be sort of applicable. I mean, I'm toying with the idea of at some point, even like it's an artificial division between the development and Power BI and maybe to a certain extent consulting as well, right? Arguably, you could offer one that is just whatever you need for your Business Central system right now, right? I think usually the challenge there would be that you could easily get stuck on doing Power BI for a long time. So I think the whole one task at a time could become limiting in terms of what you can do. So that's pretty much what we do. I mean, there is also the fixed price option, but that's a little bit more obvious, from other people. But I mean, I think ultimately the idea is people would go for this, whether, for two things, whether because they have a lot of stuff and they just need predictability in terms of, ease of budgeting, how much it's going to cost. And I mean, over time, the benefits of building a relationship with someone like us, it compounds, right? I mean, we get to learn about your system, and I mean, our incentive is to sort of keep delivering value. And actually, equally important, when I was talking to the person that probably influenced me the most that he was doing on the CRM, it's almost your job to obviously self-interest to find more stuff for them to give you to do, right? But that means essentially, if you're not worried about billing, you can go and once you learn a company, you can make suggestions and say, have you ever considered this? Have you considered this? Or by the way, you could improve this process if you wanted, and here's how it would look. Imagine, normally if you try to do this for anybody, normally you'd have to ask them to bill for it, but it sort of provides you a more collaborative way with them.
Interesting. Alfredo, you have a take on that as well, if you mind sharing that with
absolutely.
us.
Absolutely. So my take is mainly coming from what I'm doing now. As I moved away from solution architecture and consulting, and I started doing more training and eventually advisory, I see that both models can work really well, but they typically work well and they address two different, scenarios. Particularly, they align to a different strategy. And so let me tell you what happens with us, with D365 training. We have fixed price for training for certifications. And that goes without, it's quite obvious, right? Because it's pretty much a packaged service and we need to comply with Microsoft curriculum because we help consultants and users learn to pass the exam, essentially. We also have a fixed price for what we call corporate training, right? You need to train 50 users in the shop floor team, manufacturing and handhelds, right? And it's pretty much like outcome based. And if it's outcome based, it means at the end of our training sessions, your users' proficiency and ability to use the applications will go from 20% to 80%. And we measure the before and after. And that is absolutely fixed price because time and material doesn't really work, right? But it's outcome based more than related to the product in itself. So I might have a gigantic markup on that, right? But that doesn't matter. So it's outcome based. Once that, and the outcome based and fixed price, it's a very good way to eliminate, remove resistance when you're talking to a new customer, a new prospect, because as Kristen correctly said, it's, well, that's aligned to my budget, right? I am shopping for this product or service. My manager gave me a budget to spend, and of course my manager expects a sort of an improvement. In our case is again proficiency or ability to pass the exam and obtain the certification. Measurable, specific. And that is a good way to get through your clients and acquire new clients. What happens afterwards? If we provide, when we provide more value in terms of value perceived by the client, and we do that because we never go through the official Microsoft training platform. We always enhance it. So all my collaborators are Microsoft certified trainers and consultants with at least 10 years of experience. The trainer who takes care of finance and operations and manufacturing, she works with Dynamics and also SAP. So she knows manufacturing inside out. And so once we get that additional value, so you know what? You went the extra mile. You overpromised and over-delivered, right? Just to use, just to change a phrase which is very common in business. And then it starts advisory. And advisory, in my opinion, is now we move away from outcome-based and fixed price. And it can be a retainer, but it's definitely time and material. And the benefit of working on time and material is that the clients ask me for time and material. And I'll give you an example. If I want to go through a personal training program, let's say, right? I can buy an app and I can subscribe to an app and the app will tell me, well, tomorrow is chest day and next day is legs days and this is how many reps you need to do, right? Fixed price, fixed outcome, I know what to expect. But the perception about the value that I get from that app will never be the same as me working with a personal trainer. And I know that a personal trainer is not going to be about outcome based. I cannot really tell a personal trainer, I will pay you £5,000 and I want you to increase my strength, my bench press by 20%, right? I know it doesn't work like that. I don't really want that. I want a personal trainer to have a personal relationship with me, because eventually, throughout the weeks and the months, my needs will change. My habits will change. Something might happen to me that means that I cannot do the squats anymore. And we still need to find a way to train my legs without doing squats. And I move back to a business example because businesses change and they evolve fast. And so when I speak to a CFO who is about to embark into a series of acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions, and they have finance and operations, but he knows that using Business Central for the subsidiaries will save him licenses. He uses this hub-and-spoke model. Then we know that we have the setup and configuration and integration on fixed price, and the strategy on how to drive change management for the individual subsidiaries is going to be time and materials, because I cannot package that as a service. And so having the two models working together to address different needs and there's different strategies to serve our clients, in my opinion, is the best approach. And I don't believe that we have any conflict or disagreement with Kristen, because it's really about not one model is the one way forward and the other model is obsolete and we need to get rid of it, right? It's whichever works for the organization. And that's my take and that's my experience.
Okay. One thing I want to say with the outcome, theoretically, the subscription model is kind of on the way to outcome based. Essentially, that's really what, it's ideal to reach. The problem is, maybe in training and maybe in narrow things, the problem is defining the outcome and attributing contribution, right? But arguably the best way you could sell something to someone, and that works like, let's say, when you bring a machine into a manufacturing shop, right? If we bring this thing, it's going to speed up production, and therefore this is the obvious ROI, right? It's easy. This is what I put in. This is what improved, right? When it comes to software, when it comes to at least our ERP world, it's a little bit fuzzy, right? So, if there was a way to actually be able to measure that and attribute it, then honestly, that's really how one would want to actually price it, because then it's easy, if you can do something that at the end of the day, saves you $1 million, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for $100,000 for that, right? But that's kind of the challenge there, right? So, I think from that perspective, yeah, I don't necessarily think we're different. It's just like, subscription is the best you could do as of right now, right? And yeah, I'm not necessarily against no, actually I am against hourly rate, but obviously if someone wants to do it, I found myself, there are specific scenarios in which that works. Interesting enough, last year when I was doing the marketing for my hourly rate is .com, I actually found myself arguing with website designers to actually work by the hour. But the reason I did that is because I think that is the difference. Usually, package stuff or other subscriptions, something like that, they try to lock down a lot more what you get for it. So like every website designer and every sort of person that I talked to, they were like, well, don't worry about it. This is the fixed price. You get the website, 4 pages, this many edits or whatever. And I'm like, look, first of all, I know what you're going to ask me. You're going to ask me at the beginning, because that's kind of the other problem, right? Yeah. They were like, you got to give me everything or that's going to be on those pages, and you sort of tell me which layout, or I'm going to share some and you pick one, and then that's it. And I'm like, well, I don't really have the time to put all 4, and actually I work a lot better if I see it. So how about we get a schema, and then, I'll tell you what to fill in each of them. And I ended up basically sort of, burning through about 5 or 6 of them. I ended up in paid disputes on Upwork.com with a whole bunch of them. Mainly on principle, everything was like $300. So it was the principle of the matter rather than anything else. But I think that's kind of the other, that's, yes, if you want something completely specific, where I was like, you just sit here and you listen to me, and there's no way we can ever limit it. But even in that case, exactly. If someone was saying, okay, you're gonna get this much from me every month, that would be okay. I mean, I think my problem with the way I got to hourly rate is that, and the reason I do actually hate hourly is because, I mean, the way I got here is let's start with the simplest thing. Who decides what the hourly rate is, right? Like, there's an hourly rate, fine, and there's a number, right? I mean, like, I forget, to my surprise, I heard some people having some interesting rates in Denmark, so I don't really know Europe, but US, it can be anywhere between, apparently right now, between $100 and $300, right? So who decides what the hourly rate is, right? Like, how do you pick an hourly rate, for instance?
I can give you an answer to that, and then that's a very good way to look at the hourly rate. First of all, hourly rates are common in if you work with large partners, and it's essentially a cost management tool. An organization that employs 50 consultants must work on a hourly rate because they need to look at the chargeability. So how many hours this consultant can work on something I can charge to my client, as opposed to the total number of hours that he or she works for my organization. And therefore, it's essentially payroll as a cost of service, a cost of sales, as opposed to what I bill. And there comes time sheets and everything. It's an essential measurement for partners to see if the delivery is profitable. In a way, it's like managing your cost of sales when you sell merchandise. That's why we have the timesheets, right? And that's why it's such an industry standard. That, though, creates a limitation, because what does hourly rates? Hourly rates incentivize overbilling and inefficiency. And this is what clients are getting used to. They get invoices and say, well, why did a consultant, you charged me with 4 hours of a consultant to review a VAT statement. Well, I can ask ChatGPT to review my bank statement, and I can actually get someone like a junior in my team to get it in half an hour. Clients have already started challenging these habits, and it's a good thing. So, but that doesn't mean that we need to completely abandon the time and material, because then, for example, I don't charge my clients by the hour, because when I work on a project base, I have a certain number of days. So my day is that rate. But you as a client, you're not going to question whether I spend 3 hours or an entire day, right? But you know that in that day, I'm going to solve that amount of problems for you. And if you work on outcome base, the number of days that I promise you I will complete that kind of job, right, is this. And so hourly rates are absolutely an issue, but it's also essential for an organization to track whether your consultants are actually, working on it. For a small company, it's easier, right? If you're a team of 4 or 5, like freelancers who work together, then it's okay. You spend 5 hours doing something, and the next 5 hours you do something else. Maybe you work on the website, right? But if I have a team of 200 people, if I am Accenture, if I have McKinsey, hourly rates are essential, because before I know, right, the cost of delivery is out of hand. And for a small company, a team of 20 or 30 consultants, that measurement is essential. So that means that your entire operating model as a consulting firm must change before you can move away from hourly rates. Otherwise, you might run in blind and say, "Are we really making money here or not?"
Yeah, that is an interesting. I think a lot of this is forced is forced by AI services or AI tools, and I see a lot of the small partners, medium, large partners that will have to eventually not necessarily change their entire operating to just be time and material, but they have to kind of reflect upon themselves, like, okay, what are the areas that we do can be productized or subscription or fixed price? Because for example, if you're a small partner, for you to grow, and if you do it in a time and material, you grow by adding more people. Well, as we all know, hiring is tough. And then they have to then be billable, like you had mentioned, Alfredo. It's utilization of the hours that they spent, and as we all know, a lot of the new clients moving into Business Central or in the Dynamics 365 ERP system, they are a bit smarter than ever before because of AI. So they're coming in prepared, and they're coming prepared in a sense where this is the outcome that I want. And so you're forced to like, okay, I can't really time and material some of those. I've seen those, right? You've been doing this for a long time. Yes, I've done that 5 times. I know what it takes. And so it becomes that, hey, I'm going to find some average here of the typical time it takes. And I'm going to go ahead and this is the price for that, rather than nitpick of the hours. And I wrote this about a week ago, and I think, Christian, you had commented on it, is that if you have a time and material work of 10 hours, and because you're so efficient, you're so good, and you've done it before, and you did it in 2 hours, you're kind of shooting yourself on the foot of, it's sort of a pay cut of that time and material when you say, hey, it's going to X amount of dollars. Whether you do it 1 hour or 6 hours, it doesn't really matter, because the outcome, you have the expected outcome. So it's a balance, but not every single one. So you may have to do like a hybrid as you try to, as a partner, you got to survive. How do you survive? Well, you might have to do a hybrid approach, whether you do a subscription or fixed price in some areas and so forth. But
let me comment to that before I leave it to Kristen to answer. Hybrid models are becoming more and more prevalent, particularly with large partners. And I get this data from Gartner, but also from a guy who does independent ERP advisory, Eric Kimberlin, I believe. He leads a company called Third Stage Consulting, and they are a technology vendor agnostic ERP advisors. And they often work with large partners. They don't work with small companies. They don't do Dynamics, SAP, Oracle, and they often work with Accenture, the kind of large companies. And I happened to work with one of these large companies for a couple of years before, because they started a Business Central practice, and I helped them in the early days. And then they decided that model wasn't working for them. And I got a unique insight about how large companies like Accenture, for example, already works on hybrid models. They have these models. So part of the implementation is time and materials. It typically is the strategy, the pre-sales, right? Success by design, Microsoft Success by Design, call it the strategy part, right? When we strategize. And because there are so many things that are unknown, is time and materials. Then it comes the part when we define the statement of work, and that is often fixed price or, quoted based on the number of hours, right? The number of hours still matter. Now, in some cases, companies like Avanade, I'm not saying anything, confidential because it's part of their methodology. It comes from, Avanade is a large partner, right? Part Accenture, part Microsoft, owned by them, right? They have 2 separate methodologies. So 2 different strategies to address 2 different types of challenges. One is called product-based, and the other is client-based. So product-based is for companies that have an outcome-based need, which is urgent, and they have a fixed budget. And so, for example, we're going through an acquisition. We need to comply with US GAAP because a US company is buying our assets. And we work in a highly regulated environment, asset management, financials, legals. What's the urgency? If we don't get a new system, we'll break compliance. If we break compliance, our stock shares and stakeholders, and then we are in trouble. That means, and we have a limited budget. Companies like that says, you know what, I'll give you a fixed price for the entire implementation, but you need to follow everything we tell you, and this is the features that you will get, and if your team uses different processes, you will be responsible for the change management and adapt to the changes of our software, because our software complies with your standards. So legally, you'll be fine. These are the fast track, fixed price, fixed budget implementation, and it works all the time. The second is customer-centric, company first. It's completely bespoke advisory. It's more agile than waterfall. It's always time and materials, because the end result is unpredictable by definition, right? And so they might have some fixed prices for their licenses. For example, if you have IP, intellectual property, Power BI, right? So we understand that you have Business Central and General Ledger is in scope, and you have 20 legal entities, and you want a consolidated trial balance in Power BI. We got that. It's our IP, right? It's £10,000 and $500 a month to maintain it, right? But the rest is pretty much time and materials, right? So big companies like that already do that, and they see that as a benefit. Smaller partners for Business Central are slow to adapt, even though there are global partners, like Business Central partners that operate globally, and we know there are a few of them, probably 5 or 10, not many. They started to adopt this hybrid model very successfully. But the problem is that we live in a small and medium enterprise world, and where things change all the time, right? And sometimes we speak with a founder of a small company, and you know what? I know exactly what we all know the challenges of dealing with a business transformation effort with the founder of the company. Because the budget is the money that he or she set aside, after spending 20 years working on the organization. That's the element of working with the small and medium enterprises. But I'm sorry for this long spending too much time here. Just wanted to confirm that the hybrid model is absolutely the future, and it's been already used by large partners very successfully. We just need to adapt it and bring it to the small and medium enterprise world.
Where do I start? Well, see, I think the difference is that all the examples you said, Alfredo, they're not really, in my opinion, they're not the spirit of what I'm talking about with the fixed price and subscription. So first of all, even fixed price, like if we do fixed price implementations, and I'm about to start one next week, and I've already done one like this. We go to the client and say, this is the budget, and we think we can do it in this many months. In this case, there's a budget, there's 5 months that we committed that we're going to go them live in that. If we go live in 3 months, basically they still pay us for the other 2 months. If we go live after the 5 months, then we keep working for free until that. And mainly because I hate timesheets, maybe that's just me. Right, but essentially we did a discovery for a week. Because I know the industry to a certain extent, essentially we did the discovery on for a week, talking to the team. But I mean, everything was just him going like, oh yeah, we have a warehouse down in Washington, and basically we need to support that. Oh yeah, we have this. Granted, I know a lot of the stuff that they do in the industry, right? That's the spec, okay? And I didn't spend money. I didn't spend any money on that. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. There's a difference between, of course, yeah, sure, essentially you can sort of, do all the little, what is the small print in terms of doing, right? But I mean, I think it's an interesting thing in everything, the substrate here, it's interesting how everything is from the perspective of the partner, but it's not from the perspective of the customer. Because I mean, there was a reason I asked about who decides hourly rate, right? I mean, here's the thing, it's an SMB company. Most of the time, a team of 1, 2, or 3 people will be able to do an implementation. So, a partner that charges $300 an hour, or someone that charges $100 an hour, a lot of times could be delivering the same value, right? Yes, you're right about the fact that the partner has a reason to charge that $300 because they have a lot more overhead, right? And then also, frankly, they charge that because they invest a lot more on the marketing. I mean, there's a difference between what is the store brand, I think, whatever, what is it?
Generic.
Ibuprofen versus ibuprofen versus Advil and all that kind of stuff, right? So I mean, we know the economics of how you sort of maybe go to that, But then essentially at the end of the day, that doesn't take into consideration what is good for the customer, in my opinion, right? Like for the customer, that shouldn't really matter. And I mean, to a certain extent, it does, right? I don't think anybody's ever gone and said, hey, man, I got to charge you, $1,000 an hour because I got to pay my people, right? I mean, ultimately there is a message. The stuff that I've been taught, and I mean, part of the reason why I feel like I need to be strident about the whole thing with, hence even the name of the website, is that when I've gone to marketing people and, part of this thing is you get a guarantee in terms of like kind of how much you're going to get billed, what you get in terms of services, depending if you go with the fixed price. A lot of marketing people, like companies over $10 million, don't make a decision based on basically cost benefit analysis and everything else. They make a decision based on essentially, what is the lowest risk? If it goes wrong, the project, well, no, but the lower risk, see, when you say that, people think, okay, that means low risk means whoever can do the best work. No, I mean, a lot of times is lower risk means if it goes wrong, can I explain to my bosses without losing my job? And I mean, the problem is the perception seems to be, I mean, I don't like that answer because basically that just means there's no space for people like us here, right? If I don't want to be a company of whatever, how many, Western, Velasio, Archer Point have, right? Then that means theoretically there's no space for me. I know there is a space for me because I've been around for 20 years. But I mean, like, that's kind of the idea, right? At the end of the day, if you make a decision based on that, then you know what? Maybe I don't want you as a customer because then you're paying for. That's the other thing. You're not paying for an insurance because that would be the other thing. Like if you pay for an insurance, hey, if it goes over or whatever, something like that's another thing. But you're just paying for the perception of being able to make that decision. Either that or just simply whatever. You buy the salesperson and anything else. So to me, it's more of change. I am starting and I am looking very hard from what is really good for the customer, right? If you look on LinkedIn, what are the most common complaints the customers have? Project didn't succeed, or it wasn't what they expected. They got overbilled for it, things like that, or basically they didn't get what they expected. This is not me saying this. This is exactly what, and every thought leader on LinkedIn tells you how you can avoid those things, right? And I mean, fair enough. You can argue about how you get to them, but that's kind of the idea, The point of how I got to this is both the fact that I find that I know I'm just as good and sometimes better than a lot of the people that are out there from the bigger partners. So therefore, sure, yeah, if you're a big company that needs 100 people, there's a value in that, and not everybody can deploy that. And in that case, you can argue for you need to support the cost of my staff. But I mean, like for the SMB world, it's just what can you deliver, right? And in that case, hourly rate is not a good measure by any stretch of the imagination because it doesn't say anything. It's an arbitrary number based on how much you can bill, right? Christopher, going back to the AI, I think that kind of puts it in more focus now because there is that point too. Yes, I mean, we all probably silently or not so silently working on, the whole agents for the development and everything. Then all of a sudden, the mods are 2 hours instead of 20 hours, right? Something like that, right? So yeah, it is a question. I mean, I'm not really sure what the right answer on that one is, but the reality is that ultimately someone that's hungry will bill 2 hours for that 20 hours, right? So therefore, my opinion is you might as well, or otherwise you change the sort of concept the other way around. You basically, what am I delivering the way I'm delivering it? And I mean, you stop talking about the cost of it, right? Essentially, because I don't know, there's a lot of other variables around that stuff. So, I mean, I think that's kind of why the subscription here, it's more of just generally what will the customer sort of, pay for. And here's the thing, the AI also they can do a lot of the stuff themselves, right? I mean, if anything, I've been reading debates on the legal, industry where basically you have like this big company called Harvey AI that is kind of like apparently kind of taking over the low level work, right? Alfredo, to your point of like, what's the word, hybrid stuff, right? I mean, I think it's going to become to either you self-service through AI or someone that can kind of surface the AI for you, but I still believe it will be subscription. And then what will be left is, think about it. If you're a litigation lawyer that has to go to court, that's probably not possible to do that, which is maybe, Alfredo, what you're talking about the strategy part at the beginning. I actually see those lawyers that maybe charge now $5 to $1,000 an hour. They probably will end up charging $5,000 an hour, mainly because you will only need them a fifth of the time they used to, right? So like I think that's kind of the idea. The hourly rate is going to become maybe the outlier, in a lot of things, and then everything else is going to have to be how fast can you deliver it there, And I mean, I think, on the I side, but that's another conversation. Who can find the cheapest token cost to get there also, because that seems to be a thing, sort of ignored in those conversations.
I think that's very true. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you made you called out something that's very, I think it's very important as a partner, as I think all of us are in the partner side of things, right? Is that when you are building your hybrid model, right, whether fixed price or subscription, you also have to consider who fits in that. And Christian, you had said, maybe you're not my customer, and that's okay, right? That is okay. If they're not a fit for you because you don't have the capacity, or it's just not, maybe it's a higher risk client, you don't take that on. You take on the ones that are maybe that fits your model. In this case, many SMBs do, because a lot of times they come in, I have a budget. Here's what I can spend. And so it's much easier. And if you do a time and material, it kind of scares a lot of them off, because it's like, okay, it's going to be up and down. Is it going to be more? Is it going to be less? I mean, that's a risk that they have to take. But if they have a budget, like I think another common thing that you guys may get asked, I certainly get asked from time to time, is that what happens after go live, right? Someone's going to help me maintain. So you may have some sort of subscription in that case to like, hey, I can help you maintain, you get whatever moving forward, because that's also a common thing, right? Once they go live, a big partner may have taken them live, and it's like, I haven't heard from them because you're not a project base anymore. You're not time and material, you're just reaching out from time to time. So things to consider. And I think you made a big call out there, Christian, is that it's okay if they're not the right client for you.
That's a positioning, right? It's a strategy. So I think we correctly identify a key driver of the right, or what drives the right billing cycle, which is essentially a strategic decision to acquire new customers, right? Is the client a good fit for me? Clients that expect a packaged service, right? And they are risk adverse, and therefore they want that particular job to be completed in a certain time and under a certain budget, might actually not be the right clients for you, depending on how you deliver. And a small and medium enterprise that goes through frequent changes might actually be a pain, right, to service on a fixed price, because you start with something and then scope creep happens all the time. Someone, the CFO changes, and then we have a new warehouse manager who wants to change the way the warehouse works, but they expect everything to be done in a certain way. Your cost to deliver will eventually have an impact. If you deliver it, if you are a freelancer or a small team, and I've been there, what's the common tendency? Well, I'll do it for you. And my project manager, well, Alfredo, we don't really have the budget for that. Okay, I'll spend an extra 2 hours, and I will not put a timesheet through, because I just want to please my customer. And that happens in our world all the time. And if you measure over a year, you will find out most small partners with less than 20 or 30 consultants end up working more, but they don't actually, charge the clients because, well, actually, we don't have a budget for that. Can you please do it this time? And I was going through an analysis when I worked for the last partner before I ended up working full-time for D365 training. And I made an estimate that the team of 35 consultants averaged a 20% essentially burnout, so overwork. So 20% constantly. Every 10 hours, 2 hours were free of charge. And that's because project manager, we don't want a budget, and we want to please the customer, right? And so fixed price can work for all the customers. And then what drives the hourly rate if you really want to work an hourly rate? Well, your ability to deliver value for money, which is absolutely, we will get to a point where a consultant can charge $2,000 per hour because we can deliver what 10 years ago would take a week in half an hour. And so, like lawyers, divorce lawyers of celebrities, right? Or Hollywood personal trainers. And why are they so expensive? Because their brand, their position, their expertise, their social proof, right, tell us they can deliver, right? If that personal training can get that actor to be fit for the next, superhero movie, right? Chances are, if I work with him, I will always, also get in shape. Of course, we don't know that it's not true, but it's a perception. So hourly rate is cost of sales, cost to deliver, but also your branding. And so it's about your marketing, your sales, and, as Kristen said, your ability to convey that message, lower risk. If something goes wrong, we have enough, to support you, which will not bankrupt us, right? And so think about that little SAP failed implementation. Was it last year or a couple of years ago? If you search about Lidl failed SAP implementation, I believe it was the US branch Lidl went through a SAP implementation and they ended up spending, $50 million on development before the CEO said, we're going nowhere, stop. We stop working, right? And so what happens on that stage? I say, well, if we make a mistake, you just fire us, right? We don't work here anymore. So hold on a moment. If you just made me spend 50 million on something that we're going nowhere, I'll take you to court. And so risk is an element. So as a CEO who needs to spend $100 million on a SAP or Oracle or Dynamics implementation, maybe Dynamics is not going to get there eventually. But again, let's say SAP implementation. I want a partner who's got experience and proven experience in multi-million-dollar implementation, so likelihood to succeed, but also want a partner who, if they fail, I can go to my board of directors and say, well, there was a chance we failed, they failed. What's the contingency? We're taking them to court. How much money we can make by if we win this lawsuit? Enough to recover, because it's a big company and they have cash in the bank. And that also what drives your hourly rate, because that reduces the risk of failure, right? And so, but that is brand and its position. It's not about our ability, right, to deliver. Because what's the difference between a SAP consultant who works for, McKinsey, and a manufacturing manager who works for Business Central with 20 years of experience in the shop floor? Technical skills. Manufacturing is manufacturing. Right? The daily rate cannot be that different, right? Manufacturing consultant making $80K a year, and then a manufacturing consultant for McKinsey cannot make $800K a year, right? It's unthinkable. So it's our ability eventually, a skills plateau, right, gets to a point where everything around us, our company, the brand, the marketing, right, the history, the brand, right, the logos, some companies spent hundreds of thousands of pounds for a logo. And whether we like it or not, and I'm a supply chain guy, I don't understand marketing. I don't understand how a company can spend $500,000 on a logo and all of a sudden their shares go up. To me, it's a sign that the world is going mad. But apparently that works. And so we need to accept that that's how it works.
It's a luxury. People willing to pay luxury.
Exactly for that. So
luxury. Yeah. And then just to go back to the SMB discussion, versus the enterprise, I had to look this up. Just on the U.S. alone, it says that 99.9% of businesses are all SMBs, where they have employees that's less than 500. So talking about where does your fixed price subscription model fits, Christian, that's practically everybody, right? So think about that. It's like it's really rare that you can have someone that's 1,000 people using, and that's when you have larger projects where you maybe consider the time and material, because there's a lot of variables at that point. But
I think, I mean, one thing that I want to say, I mean, I think you guys misunderstood when I said that's not a customer that fits me. I don't, well, I mean, I tried. I cannot compete with someone that wants to buy IBM. You know, like there was Latin America at the beginning when they're trying to, I met some people that were trying to sell Business Central, was saying the hardest big problem was nobody knew who Business Central was at the beginning, right? And they're like, we have this philosophy of nobody got fired for for hiring IBM, right? You know, and IBM was making an ERP at the time in Latin America for it. So to me, I think the idea is I'm not willing, I don't have the money, nor the interest of spending the money that everybody else spends on marketing. I mean, I think about it, Birkin bag, a regular bag they buy from Target, they both carry the same thing, right? You know, the Lamborghini, whatever, it's the same thing, right? It might be less practical if you want to go to the market. So to me, that's kind of the idea. You know, I want to find the customers that want to get stuff done. And I think that's going to become a bigger and bigger, part of the market, right? You know, reality is if we were contractors, we all of us would actually be millionaires if we could do the same budgets. Why? Because if it's your own house, you care about, who comes and does the work, and it is your own money. I think the reality is the incentives that, in a lot of companies are more political. It's not your own money. And you worry about more what happens for your position than whether this is the right person and the right service and everything else. But I mean, I think one of the, I put this in some comments on LinkedIn or some of the things that we posted. I think one of the frustrating things to me to see, at least maybe you guys are just not as vocal as I am in my head, but considering the size of SMB companies of 10 up to 50 million, and we say a couple of people, why isn't everybody looking at AI and saying, instead of wondering, because I can do something in 20 hours in 2 hours and everything, all these other things that can be done, quote unquote AI, which I'm still not 100% convinced of it. Why isn't everybody thinking that, okay, now I can compete with Archer Point and Velocity and everybody else, right? I mean, yes, then at that point, if they can field enough teams of the same quality as you by yourself or you and a couple of other people that sure, they can do more projects, but then it's a very linear situation, right? Right now, customers are starting projects by going to Microsoft and being funneled to whoever buys the most licenses, right? But I mean, I think take it as much as, this is my opinion, as much as I feel trying to change the playing field, right? At the end of the day, if customers were looking at getting stuff done rather than, hey, Microsoft recommended, hey, I saw them everywhere, so they must be good. Hey, I saw them on the Golf Channel, they must be good. Salesforce, right? At the end of the day, I mean, like basically, then that's a different story. If they were going for actual results, call it whatever you want. Doesn't have to be subscription, that's a fixed price, could be outcome based, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I mean, I see this on the Silicon Valley stuff, like, on the West Coast, you follow the blogs and there's companies that have, 10, 20 million ARR, right? And essentially they are like 3-4 people, right? So the question is, why not look at this and say, hey, we can do the same thing. I mean, you don't necessarily need the same level of marketing, the same level of everything else. You don't need all that support to deliver this stuff, right? The biggest problem to me right now is the inertia, legacy, or old-fashionedness of our world in terms of, hey, whoever we know and whatever we've heard most, it's the lesser risk, right? But I mean, I feel even for those companies, ultimately, this is what they're talking about. Like, if you're adopting, and it doesn't have to be AI, to me, if you're adopting anything that, companies without an ERP definitely wouldn't compete with a company with ERP today, right? So, even the customers need to feel the pressure of, you need to be as efficient as you can be, right? So to me, that's the idea, yes.
Incentivize efficiency, because right now, because of AI, you're penalizing everyone else, or even yourself, because you're so efficient with your job. So why are you being penalized? Oh, you got to sell the hours. That's the old school mentality, right? On the consulting space, is that time. How much time you spend is what you're being graded upon. It should be efficiency.
There's a lot more to that whole discussion. I kind of just wanted to hear everybody's thoughts on the what you call subscription, fixed price versus hourly. I do think there's a mix, but the efficiency point of view, I think it all comes back down to the value. There's value to somebody for something. And I go back and forth on my thoughts on this. Alfredo, to what you're talking about, where you can, and Christy, you had mentioned that you can charge $5,000 per hour for a lawyer because of the credibility, or for the trainer because of the branding. That's great. But I mean, that is great, and that's may be possible in some cases, right? I'm not going to discount that. But everything has a value. And what is the value of something to whomever is consuming it, right? Yep. And it's not even, and value sometimes is individualistic. It is worth this to me for this, whatever that may be. So there is a space for the time and materials type thing, because there are some things that you really can't quantify because they're, again, personal training, for example, my take on this. You can't say that it's only going to take an hour for me to get you to look like a star for the show. Therefore, it may have additional time. But there's other things where I want a deck built for my house. Christy, we spoke about this last time. That deck's worth $2,000 to me. I don't want it to be $17,000, because then I wouldn't have it, because it's not worth it to me. Now, Chris, you're talking about the efficiency. When they first invented the computer, the personal computer, they were really expensive, right? And I even remember RAM. I bought a 4 meg of RAM chip for $200 or some nonsense early on. Now you can buy 256 gig for $4, right? Not necessarily today. So just because you charge something for a certain point, because we became more efficient in delivering it, doesn't mean it has and holds the same value, right? So it's, if you want to say that AI is going to quantify and the cost should still stay the same, goes with what Alfredo is saying. Like, there's so many mixes to what everybody's saying. It's, you have the cost of delivery. Your cost of delivery goes down, right? Theoretically. Now you have individuals that you have to pay and stuff, but if you have that efficiency, your cost of delivery goes down. So what do you do with that efficiency? Do you charge as if the cost of delivery is still high? Or do you adjust it for that delivery? Or do you just go back with, here's the value to a person for this. If we get it done in 1 day, we get it done in 1 day. If we get it done in 5 days, we get it in 5 days. It's not the time that's the important thing. It's the deliverable that's the important thing. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at. And I think everyone has different viewpoints and opinions on this. But I think we're in that transition period because everyone's talking about this from the T&M and consulting point of view, because AI has really increased the efficiency, not just in development, in documentation, in research, in creating guides, creating SOWs. I can name the number of different things where I've seen AI far outside of development, right? Even personal training. I've seen people come up with personal training plans using it. And I'm not saying they're all perfect, but again, I can go to personal trainer A and personal trainer B, and they won't give me the same training plan. And one of them may be better than the other. So it's not a matter of AI is going to always be perfect. You know, a lot of people try to say, oh, AI is wrong. But every single one of us here has done something incorrectly as well. So
I just, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done with that.
I just had like an epiphany on what you said. See, I just realized something. So you say that, you know, there's the AI and the efficiency and everything else, and there's a value to everything. See, here's the interesting thing. I feel that in our world, there really isn't a bidding process. The problem is the customer doesn't know what are the possible ways that a cost of something would be. Because normally, if you do an implementation, you sign up with someone and you just go with them and you figure it out from there, right? A lot of customers don't do the bidding process, mainly because either the license play or they're not educated enough to really get 3-4 quotes from someone, right? I think the world would be different if you know what it's worth, but then do you know how much it's going to cost? Even when people go and hire from recruiters, I thought that's kind of a weakness in the way they do it. You go and find a person. Sure, you look at the qualifications. Maybe you make a good judgment. Maybe you don't. You know, you find out the hourly rate. But at the end of the day, you don't really know how much it's going to, you know, if that's the best way to achieve that, if that's the only way to achieve that, you know? I mean, here's a question. You know, imagine if in our world we had a way where basically customer could put a project out there, whether that's an implementation, whether that's something afterwards, and then they get bids on it. Would you participate in something like that?
That's an interesting one. I'm going to close with this example, but with a quote. Not really a quote, something that I learned through sales, and then it was this example. Organizations and ultimately buyers buy services with certain expectations. How much value will that bring to my organization, right? The likelihood of that person delivering the service according to what I need, and how much is going to cost me, not just in terms of budget, how much will have to participate in it. And that all affects the value equation. And if I'm above the value threshold, I made the sales, I made it, I buy it. So 3 years ago, I started working with this organization in Dublin, a wonderful company with branches across Europe. And they work with hospitals and clinics, and they provide medical equipment, including surgical tools. So imagine inventory management, what kind of quality, management you need to follow if you deliver things that go into the operating theatre. We started talking about data migration, and the IT manager said, we don't have the bandwidth, and we don't have the capacity, and we have a legacy system, NAV, that it's now off support, and we don't know how many people put their hands in that system. So I know the IT manager said that it's going to be so that you will find anything in there. And we don't want our team to touch it because they will make mistakes and they will try to bring bad data into the new system. I want you guys to manage that for me. And says, well, we don't typically do it. It's your data. It doesn't matter how much it costs. You quote me for that. And what I want a clean system with no data errors. So, as you can imagine, that ended up being an astronomical figure that I helped the data team at the time. I was working with a large partner. And we put together we didn't have the strategy for that. So I put together a developer, nav, SQL, data extraction, data model, data cleansing, find duplicates. I mean, as you can imagine, I'm not going to technical detail, it was a nightmare. We ended up with an estimate. And so, but this is the first time we do that. We ended up with, 50 days. And so we said, okay, double that up and go back to the client and say, this is the figure. Because there was so much uncertainty. We ended up doubling that figure, going to the client, and the client says, it took that IT manager 50 seconds to say, okay. Because he knew that the cost of getting his team to work with that kind of data was so high, and the risks of making mistakes were just unbearable. The price was no longer a problem. They went live last year. They ended up, even though I stopped working with our partner years, and soon after the discovery, when I started working, I started D365 the same IT manager called me, Alfredo, I want you to come back and work with us. And they went live, and it was very fine, very complex go live for an organization with 12 legal entities in different regions, enormous amount of work. Data migration, a few hiccups, smooth. The IT manager said, you know what, the best part of this project, we didn't have to touch the data from our legacy system. And so that is something that we don't always, consider. How much will it cost the client to do what we don't do, what we can deliver? And that might be something that we don't sell, but if they perceive the value in us, then it's no longer about the daily rate, or the rate can go up. The fact that I helped 3 life science companies go live in the last 6 years, all delivering to the NHS, the national health system in England, made me the perfect fit for an organization that needs to deliver the same service to a hospital, because I knew about their processes. And then the risk of getting it wrong is low. The likelihood of getting it right, and that's what drives the delay. So who decides the daily rate? Thank God for free market. right?
No, I think there's a lot there. I do want to throw back just you hit on some key points with the value. There's the value to the customer, and there's many things that go into considering the value. Also, we talk about, Kris, to go back to the points with the AI efficiency, just to double back on that. It's just because we can do it faster doesn't necessarily mean it's cheaper. And I didn't want to come across that way if I said that, because sometimes it's the experience, as you had mentioned, Alfredo, just now, and I wanted to get into, the experience of the person orchestrating a project has a lot of value to it. So just because AI can do something in 3 minutes doesn't mean the person that is orchestrating the AI has the same ability to get the same quality of stuff generated in 3 minutes. I want to put that out there. I think that's important as well. Well, Kristi, Alfredo, I could talk about this topic for days. I do believe we're all in a transition period here. I do think that the subscription model, as you call it, or I don't want to say fixed bid, but having the model where somebody can know exactly what they're getting and they have a cost, has a space. And I also do see a space still where we have to say there's some time and materials, because there really isn't a way to quantify the output. I think, in my opinion, that's a mix. I know everybody has different opinions with how it is. Yeah. But I appreciate taking the time to speak with us today. Like I said, we could talk about this for days. If anyone wanted to get in contact with you to talk a little bit more about your services, the model that you have, and anything else that you can share on implementations, Kristi, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Just through the website, hourlyrateiser.com.
Okay, great. Thank you. Alfredo?
And for me, it's either LinkedIn or my website, d365training.com.
Great. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking to both. Look forward to talking with you again soon. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Ciao, ciao.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.